Why you need to disappear for a while. Jung insight. There is a particular kind of tiredness that has nothing to do with sleep. You can get 8 hours a night, eat well, exercise, and still wake up feeling like you're dragging a second person behind you everywhere you go. A version of yourself built entirely out of other people's expectations. Most of us never name this feeling. We call it stress, or burnout, or just a phase. But every so often, someone reaches a point where the feeling becomes impossible to ignore, and they do something that looks, from the outside, almost rude. They go quiet. They stop replying as fast. They stop showing up to things they used to never miss. They disappear not from the planet, but from the role they'd been playing on it. This is not a story about one person. It's a pattern that repeats itself across thousands of lives, and Carl Jung spent much of his career trying to explain why. What follows is an exploration of that pattern. Why withdrawal sometimes isn't a breakdown but a kind of repair. Why the people around a disappearing person react the way they do, and why silence sustained silence has a way of showing you things that conversation never could. The moment the noise stops making sense. There's a specific point that certain people reach after years of non-stop social contact. One day, without any single dramatic event causing it, they simply stop feeling understood by the people they talk to every day. Conversations that used to feel easy start to feel like reruns. Laughter that used to come naturally starts to feel performed. Even the small buzz of a notification, once a tiny hit of connection, starts to feel like an intrusion rather than a gift. And underneath all of this, almost without realizing it, they start wanting space. Not attention, the opposite of attention, distance. Jung's view was that the mind cannot truly hear itself when it is constantly surrounded by noise. Over enough time, the personality a person builds to get along with others, the agreeable one, the funny one, the easygoing one, gets so loud that it drowns out whatever is underneath it. So people keep performing. They keep answering instantly, keep explaining themselves when no one demanded an explanation, keep maintaining friendships that quietly died years ago, not because they enjoy it, but because they're afraid of what going silent might reveal. Silence exposes things. It shows you which relationships were only ever held together by your constant availability. It shows you how many people felt close to you simply because they had uninterrupted access to your attention. And, hardest of all, it shows you the version of yourself you became just to stay acceptable to others. Most people never clock how much of their personality was constructed around keeping other people comfortable, not until they remove themselves from the equation for a while. What happens when you go quiet? Something strange tends to happen once a person actually pulls back. The people who insist they care the most start behaving differently. Some get irritated. Some turn noticeably cold. Some, oddly, become more interested in you than they've been in months. None of this is really about missing you. It's about losing access to something they had grown used to controlling: your predictability. Predictable people make other people feel safe. That's a big part of why our culture rewards constant explaining, constant emotional availability, constant reachability. A person who can always be found is a person who is easy to manage. But the second you go quiet, even briefly, the people around you are forced to face something uncomfortable. They no longer know exactly where they stand with you. And uncertainty is deeply unsettling, especially for people who had been quietly benefiting from your steady presence. Jung's insight here was that isolation is not automatically the same thing as loneliness. Sometimes withdrawal is recovery, a pulling back from an unconscious performance you didn't even know you were giving. It is, in a sense, a temporary death of the false self. Because the longer you stay constantly surrounded by people, the harder it becomes to tell the difference between who you actually are and who you became in order to survive socially. The unsettling part is that most people never notice this happening to them in real time. They spend years shaping an identity that was unconsciously built out of the fear of rejection, the fear of being left, the fear of becoming invisible. But invisibility, when you finally choose it, changes people. Once nobody can reach you on demand anymore, masks start slipping, yours included, and whatever you discover in that quiet can permanently shift how you see other people. The guilt of disappearing. At first, stepping back feels wrong, almost shameful. Your hand reaches for your phone out of pure habit. You wonder whether people think you're being rude. You feel the urge to apologize or explain before anyone has even asked you to. That instinct alone tells you something about how deeply social conditioning runs. Because somewhere along the way, most of us absorb the idea that constant availability equals goodness, that replying fast means you care, that always being present is what makes you valuable, that stepping back makes you selfish. Jung suspected something darker was underneath this belief. He thought most people aren't actually afraid of losing other people, they're afraid of being forgotten. So they stay emotionally on call long after that role has started to hollow them out. They keep having conversations they no longer enjoy. They keep maintaining friendships that feel like empty shells. They keep laughing around people who quietly exhaust them. And slowly, without noticing the exact moment it happened, they become strangers to themselves. This is the unsettling part about long-term social exposure. Human beings unconsciously reshape their personalities to survive whatever environment they're in. Around one group, you become softer. Around another, more entertaining. Around someone else, quieter, smaller, easier to overlook. Eventually, you stop knowing which version of you is actually real. You just know which version keeps the people around you comfortable. That's why solitude can feel almost frightening at first. Once the noise disappears, there's no audience left to perform for. And without an audience, the performed self starts to starve. This is exactly where most people retreat back to texting, back to scrolling, back to whatever noise is closest at hand. Because silence isn't peaceful in the beginning. Silence is confrontation. In it, you start noticing things you couldn't see before, which people only reached out when they needed emotional reassurance, which friendships were really just two people distracting each other from their own loneliness, how often you crossed your own boundaries simply to avoid disappointing someone else. Kindness without limits quietly teaches people how to use you, and most of them don't even realize they're doing it. People drift naturally toward whatever is emotionally convenient. If you always listen, they will always unload on you. If you always forgive, they will keep crossing the same line. If you always stay, they will assume you never leave, not out of malice, but because humans adapt quickly to whatever access they're given. Why your absence hits harder than your anger ever could. This is part of why disappearing unsettles people more deeply than getting angry at them ever would. Anger still gives people something to hold onto: attention, engagement, a reaction to manage. Silence removes all of that. It forces people into uncertainty, makes them start wondering, did something change? Are they upset? Are they pulling away? But what really disturbs them isn't your absence itself. It's the creeping realization that your world might keep turning just fine without them at the center of it. People frequently mistake emotional possession for connection. They assume that constant access means intimacy, that non-stop communication means loyalty, that an instant reply means love. But some of the deepest bonds between people exist quietly, without constant maintenance or reassurance. When you step back for a while, you begin separating what is real connection from what was simply dependency, and that distinction, once you see it, is impossible to unsee. Your mind grows quieter, but it also grows colder in a useful way. You start watching people not through what they say, but through how they react when you set a boundary. That's where the real shift begins. Not when you walk away from people, but when you finally start seeing them clearly. Distance has a way of clearing emotional fog. Once the constant exposure and endless back and forth conversations stop, patterns that had been hiding in plain sight suddenly become visible. You notice who was only ever talking to you out of boredom, who was quietly competing with you the whole time, who took comfort in your insecurity because it made them feel a little superior. And, more uncomfortably, you start noticing how often people punished you emotionally the moment you stopped behaving the way they had grown used to, not loudly, but in small psychological ways. A colder tone, a slower reply, passive aggression dressed up as a joke, a sudden pulling away. The human mind is extremely sensitive to even small shifts in control, and people who had unconsciously depended on your consistency for their own emotional footing feel it the most. This is part of why disappearing tends to shift relationships faster than self-improvement ever does. People can usually tolerate you growing. What they struggle to tolerate is losing access to you. Mysterious people unsettle others because the mind feels safest around what it can fully predict. Once that predictability is gone, people start inventing their own explanations for your silence. He's changed. They think they're better now. Something's off with them. Maybe. Or maybe you simply stopped handing out unlimited access to your energy. The shadow beneath the performance. Jung believed that much of human interaction runs on autopilot, beneath conscious awareness. People rarely understand the real motives behind their own emotional reactions. They just feel the reaction itself. That's part of why some people get strangely irritated when you start protecting your peace. Your boundary forces them to bump up against something in themselves they'd been avoiding. The friend who only feels important when they're needed, the person who leans on your attention to escape their own emptiness, the one who confuses emotional dependency with closeness. Your silence exposes all of it. And silence has an almost cruel way of revealing the truths that words had been quietly covering up. Sometimes you come to realize that the people around you never actually knew you. They knew the version of you that was endlessly available, the version that tolerated almost anything, the version that kept giving up its own peace to keep the surface calm. Once that version is gone, relationships start to wobble, because so many social bonds are quietly built on assigned roles rather than honesty. One person plays the therapist, one plays the entertainer, one plays the emotional caretaker. And the moment someone stops performing the role they were unconsciously cast in, people get uncomfortable, sometimes even angry, as though simply being yourself amounts to a kind of betrayal. Most relationships don't actually end when respect disappears. They end when awareness shows up, because awareness changes what you're willing to tolerate. You stop romanticizing emotional imbalance, stop making excuses for manipulative behavior, stop chasing people who only seem to value you when you're easy to reach. And strangely, the more at ease you get with solitude, the more clearly you start to understand people in general, not with hostility, but with a kind of detachment. You start to notice that many people aren't really connected to each other emotionally so much as they're connected through shared unconscious needs. Validation, attention, security, a distraction from their own company. Once you see that, even ordinary small talk starts to feel different, almost transparent. You start sensing the quiet psychological negotiations running underneath casual conversation. Who's seeking approval? Who's angling for dominance? Who's terrified of being left? Who's hiding resentment behind a polite smile? Most people never notice any of this, simply because they never sit still in silence long enough to look. The longer you stay distant, the stranger ordinary life can start to feel, not because the people around you changed, but because your perception did. You start to notice how much of modern life is engineered to keep people psychologically occupied around the clock. A constant stream of messages, updates, and stimulation designed to keep anyone from sitting alone long enough to actually face themselves. And that confrontation, Jung argued, is exactly what most people spend their entire lives quietly avoiding. Beneath the social mask, beneath the carefully managed public image, there's something less comfortable waiting in the quiet. What Jung called the shadow. Not evil, just rejected. The parts of yourself you buried in order to stay acceptable to other people. Your anger, your ambition, your envy, your exhaustion, your own private wish to vanish without an explanation to anyone. Most people suppress these feelings the second they surface, labeling them toxic or selfish or simply wrong. But suppression doesn't make any of it disappear. It just pushes it further into the unconscious, where it starts steering behavior from below the surface. That's part of why some perfectly nice people eventually explode after years of swallowing everything. It's why certain people go emotionally numb without quite understanding why. It's why someone can wake up one ordinary morning and feel strangely disconnected from their own life. The shadow was ignored for too long, and silence is what eventually forces a meeting with it. This is the part where stepping back genuinely gets uncomfortable, because eventually there's nobody left to blame and no more distraction left to hide behind. Just you, and the parts of yourself you've spent years quietly avoiding. You start to notice how much of your kindness was actually fear in disguise, how many of your relationships were maintained purely out of guilt, how much of your personality was constructed around the single goal of avoiding rejection. That realization, on its own, can be genuinely destabilizing, because most of us want to believe our identity is simply who we are. But deep, sustained isolation tends to reveal something less flattering, that large parts of personality are really adaptations, social survival strategies repeated so many times, they started to feel like the truth, the agreeable version of you, the funny version, the endlessly available version. All useful, all, in their own way, masks, patterns, not fate. Once you're aware of these masks, ordinary conversation never quite sounds the same again. You start picking up on manipulation tucked inside completely normal exchanges, not always malicious manipulation, just unconscious manipulation. People gently testing boundaries, fishing for reassurance, angling for validation, trying to manage how they're perceived. Almost everyone does this in some small way without realizing it. The uncomfortable part is recognizing that you do it too. Jung warned that anyone who sees darkness only in other people remains blind to their own shadow. Real self-awareness begins the moment you spot the same patterns inside yourself. The hunger for validation, the wish to be admired, the small, quiet resentment toward people who once ignored you, even the quiet satisfaction of being missed after you've gone quiet. None of this makes a person evil. It makes them human. And this is where a lot of people misread what solitude is actually for. It isn't about becoming superior to anyone else. It's about finally seeing yourself without the usual distortion. That process isn't comfortable, because the ego depends on a certain amount of illusion to function smoothly, and that illusion starts to crack in silence. You start to understand why some people fill their lives with constant noise, relationships, entertainment, substances, attention, because if they ever actually stopped, they might come face to face with the person underneath all of it, and they're afraid that person might feel empty, or angry, or simply lost. So they keep running. Many people aren't really addicted to their phones. They're addicted to escaping themselves. Once you see that clearly, it becomes hard to look at the world the same way again. After enough time alone, something genuinely shifts in the way the mind operates. The craving for explanations from other people fades. The urge to defend yourself against every misunderstanding starts to dissolve. Even approval begins to lose some of its emotional grip. Not because you've become numb, but because you've finally seen how fragile and self-referential most human perception actually is. People rarely see you. They see you filtered through their own needs, insecurities, and unresolved history. To one person, your quiet looks arrogant. To another, it looks mysterious. To someone else, it feels threatening. Same behavior, completely different projections. Once you understand that, you stop spending so much energy trying to control how you're perceived, because perception was never fully yours to control in the first place. Jung believed that until people become conscious of their unconscious patterns, those patterns will keep running their life, and they'll call the result fate. That's exactly what plays out in so many relationships. People repeating the same emotional cycle without ever recognizing it. The one who keeps chasing emotionally unavailable people. The one who confuses being needed with being loved. The one who keeps sacrificing themselves, hoping loyalty will eventually be returned. These are patterns, not destiny, and isolation tends to expose them with very little mercy, especially the ones tied to attachment. Because when you step away from everyone for a while, withdrawal symptoms show up not just in the people around you, but in you. You catch yourself reaching for your phone for no real reason, wondering who noticed you were gone, replaying conversations that never actually happened. That's the moment it clicks. Constant communication wasn't always connection. Sometimes it was simply a loop of stimulation keeping your mind occupied. Notifications had quietly become tiny reassurances. Replies had become a kind of proof that you mattered. Attention had become emotional oxygen. Take it away suddenly, and people panic not because they lost connection, but because they lost the distraction. Loneliness versus solitude. In real silence, there's nothing left to interrupt you. No validation to lean on, no performance to keep up, no escape route, only awareness. And awareness changes a person for good. You start to see ordinary social life, almost like a kind of theater, with everyone quietly managing impressions, hiding insecurity behind personality, projecting certainty while privately wrestling with confusion. Some people hide emptiness behind humor, some behind intelligence, others behind dominance, looks, success, or a string of relationships. But almost everyone is hiding something. That's the uncomfortable truth that isolation tends to surface. People are, underneath it all, fairly fragile creatures pretending to feel secure, and the world quietly rewards whoever performs that the best. But every performance has a cost. Some people lose authenticity. Some lose their peace. Some lose themselves entirely. And the most unsettling part is that many never even notice it happening. They become so dependent on outside validation that being alone with their own mind starts to feel genuinely threatening. So they keep filling the space with noise until life simply runs out, never once having truly met themselves. Jung's concept of individuation, becoming who you actually are, beneath the roles, requires some separation from collective expectation. Which means, at some point, you have to disappoint people. You have to become a little less available, a little less easy to explain, a little less eager to maintain every connection you've ever had. And some people will resent you for that, not because you hurt them, but because your change forces them to face their own lack of one. People rarely resent your boundaries themselves. They resent what those boundaries reveal about who they've stayed. Eventually you come back. Not in some dramatic way, most people won't even register the exact moment it happens. But you'll notice it, because something inside you no longer moves the way it used to. The old hunger to stay constantly connected loosens its grip. You stop needing every message, answered the second it arrives. You stop feeling personally responsible for keeping every relationship alive. And for what might be the first time, you understand the actual difference between loneliness and solitude. Loneliness is the ache of feeling unseen. Solitude is the calm of finally seeing yourself clearly. Most people never reach that distinction, because they spend their lives afraid of silence. Silence strips away the witnesses to their identity, and without constant interaction, they lose track of who they are. That's the real reason people panic when someone disappears. It's not that absence is cruel, it's that absence interrupts a dependency nobody had named out loud. Once access disappears, reality has a way of surfacing on its own. The person who only called when they needed emotional support quietly fades out. The people who claim to care the most suddenly stop reaching out at all. And the ones who actually valued you stay anyway, quietly, without ever demanding proof that you're still reachable. That single realization tends to reshape the entire structure of someone's relationships, not out of bitterness, but out of clarity. Once you've seen how many interactions run on unconscious emotional exchange, it becomes much harder to romanticize connection blindly. Some people, you come to understand, love attention more than intimacy. Some love control more than closeness. Some only feel near to another person when that person needs them. And often, when someone says, "I miss you," what they actually mean is closer to, "I miss access to the feeling you gave me." There's a difference, a painful one, but an important one to know. A different kind of beginning. Jung once said that the privilege of a lifetime is becoming who you truly are. What gets left out of that quote, most of the time, is how genuinely disruptive that process can be. Becoming yourself usually means quietly dismantling versions of yourself that other people had grown comfortable depending on the agreeable one, the always available one, the one too afraid to ever disappoint anyone. And not everyone is going to like what's left standing afterward. Some people only loved the parts of you they could influence. The moment they can no longer predict your reactions, your moods, or your availability, things get tense because control runs on predictability. That's why quiet tends to unnerve manipulative people more than open conflict ever could. Conflict still gives them something to engage with. Quiet just closes a door, without bothering to explain why, and people generally struggle with doors they can't reopen on command. After enough time spent alone, one more uncomfortable truth tends to surface. Most of us are shaped by collective behavior, far more than we'd like to admit. Opinions, ambitions, even personality traits, large parts of identity are quietly borrowed from whatever environment we happen to grow up or live inside of. That's part of why distance changes perception so dramatically. It loosens the grip of what might be called social hypnosis. You start asking the kind of questions most people spend a lifetime avoiding. Do I actually enjoy these relationships? Or have I just kept maintaining them out of habit? Do I genuinely believe these ideas? Or did I simply inherit them from everyone around me? Am I living as myself? Or performing a character that happens to be socially acceptable? Once those questions land sincerely, there's no real way back to not asking them. That, in the end, is the real reason disappearing changes people. Not because solitude works some kind of magic on its own, but because silence simply reveals what constant noise had been quietly drowning out. And some of what it reveals reshapes how you see human nature for good, particularly the realization that a lot of people aren't actually searching for truth, or connection, or even authenticity. Many are searching for comfort, even when that comfort is slowly costing them the person they actually are. Maybe that's the quiet thread running through all of it. Disappearing was never really about the people you left behind. It was about finding out who was left standing when nobody required anything from you. Some relationships will not survive your silence, and that will sting in a way that's hard to explain to people who haven't lived it. But some will hold steady without you having to prove a single thing, and that steadiness is worth more than every fast reply you ever gave out of fear. You don't have to vanish forever to learn this. A weekend without your phone, a season of fewer plans, a month of letting messages sit unanswered, a little longer than feels comfortable, any of it is enough to start hearing your own thoughts again underneath the noise. The world will keep moving while you're gone. The people who matter will still be there when you come back. And you, in all likelihood, will come back a little different, a little harder to predict, a little less afraid of disappointing the wrong people, and considerably more at peace with the right ones. If any part of this sounds familiar, if you've ever felt that pull to step back, just to hear your own mind clearly again, you're not broken, and you're not alone in feeling it. You're simply due for some quiet. Now, I'd like to share a meaningful story with everyone. Rest in peace. She stood at the bathroom sink and pulled the new prescription out of the cabinet. Take 1/2 tablet before bedtime, may cause drowsiness. Do not drink alcohol. Refill in 3 months. Then she looked in the mirror. She never had thought of herself as a pill head. She just couldn't sleep. At first, she thought it was menopause. She woke up hot, so she started drinking soy milk. She'd read all the articles, but still she couldn't sleep. Try aromatherapy, a friend advised. So she went to the store and bought a concoction of lavender, sweet marjoram, and chamomile. Guaranteed to work, the perky sales clerk said. Although the scent was pleasant as she went to sleep, going to sleep was not the problem. Staying asleep was. Each night her eyes popped open. She threw off the sweat-soaked covers and saw the red light-emitting diode of her clock proclaim 2 a.m. Her brain raced. Why did my husband leave me? Was it because I was too dedicated to my job, too spent at the end of the day to attempt conception? Will I ever hear the laughter of a child? My child. Was he interested in someone else? Surely not. But then, who was that woman who started calling toward the end, claiming to be a work colleague, asking him to come in on Saturdays? Did he leave for her? Where does he live now? Did he leave because of my drinking? So she started turning on the light to read. after setting the air conditioner on a cooler temperature. Reading occupied her mind to stop the racing. And often, after an hour or two, she would drift off to sleep until dropping the book would wake her again. Sometimes, she did go back to sleep at 4 or 5 a.m., and then it was a deep sleep. On those days, she slept through the alarm, making her late for work. She felt groggy during the day, unable to make a decision. She made mistakes. After some time, her boss called her in and said if her work didn't improve within 3 months, he would have to let her go. She stared at her reflection in the mirror. Was it her imagination, or were the circles under her eyes growing darker and larger? She just had to get some sleep. Go to a doctor, a friend advised. So she did. He tested her hormones since she was waking up hot. "You're too young for menopause," he said, and he prescribed exercise and eating lightly in the evening. So she started to walk, then to run, until she was up to 5 miles a day, thinking that would wear her out enough to sleep. But still, she woke up hot and couldn't sleep. She went back to the doctor, who recommended a sleep disorder clinic. She spent the night in a lab with monitors and wires connected to her head and over her heart. Who could sleep with all those people watching and all those wires? The clinic concluded there was nothing wrong with her medically. Perhaps it was psychological. So she went to therapy for a while, 10 visits to be exact, since that's all the insurance would pay for. The therapist said she was just experiencing what all middle-aged women go through, particularly recently divorced middle-aged women. Perhaps she should try meditation. So she tried yoga, cut out caffeine and became a vegetarian. But still, she woke up hot and couldn't sleep. So she went back to her doctor to ask for a sleeping pill. "It's very safe," he said, "and non-addictive. Take just a half." So she took a half and slept for a few nights. Sleep was wonderful, but then she started to awaken at the usual 2:00 a.m. hot. So she tried a whole. That worked for about a week, until she woke up hot and couldn't sleep. Her work suffered. Finally, her boss let her go. So she tried 2 pills. Sleep was not to be found. She tried 2.5. If she could just get a decent night of sleep, she could look for another job. Soon her prescription ran out, so she went to the pharmacy for some more. "You're not due for a refill for another month," the pharmacist said. "Your insurance has denied your request." Desperate at the thought of facing the night without her pills, she made an appointment with a different doctor, gave him a different name, told him she didn't have insurance, she would pay for it herself. She paid cash. She gave him the name of a pharmacy in a different neighborhood where she was not known. He gave her a prescription. It was stronger, guaranteed to make her sleep. That evening, to celebrate, she drank a whole bottle of Pinot Noir by herself. After dinner, she went upstairs, put the new sheets on the bed, and then went into the bathroom to get ready for bed. She brushed her teeth and then her hair and carefully chose the expensive nightgown, the one she'd gotten in San Diego on her honeymoon. She reached for the glass by the sink and began to fill it with water. When it was full, she set it down on the marble countertop where it made a little wet ring. She pulled the new prescription out of the cabinet. "Take 1/2 tablet before bedtime. May cause drowsiness. Do not drink alcohol. Refill in 3 months." Then she looked in the mirror. This had better work, she thought. She poured half the bottle into her hand, swallowed the pills and went to bed. But still she woke up hot and couldn't sleep. In fact, this night seemed hotter than usual. She turned down the air conditioner to 60 degrees. The air never cooled off. Every day now, she lives the same nightmare. She walks around in a sleep-deprived daze. She doesn't go out. She never changes out of her nightgown. Each night, she takes more sleeping pills. She looks in the mirror and thinks, "My God, I'm in hell." She can't sleep there, either.